Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. It's me again, Zach. Today we will be finally, for real, actually completing the Barony class tier list. It's been like a 4-hour journey, but we're at the end of it now. So, roundabout halfway through making this tier list, after I had finished all of the vanilla classes, the Eat My Hat update officially released. I had been playing a little tiny bit of the beta, but I wasn't as up to date on that one, so I just kind of went with what I knew, and I figured I'd make this video to make any corrections to the tier list that may or may not need to be made. I don't think there will be a ton. However, let's see. Out of the vanilla classes, 4, it looks like, have been slightly updated. The DLC classes, all of these ones that are in orange or this pinkish color, will be remaining where they are because they were placed on the tier list with full knowledge of any changes that might have been made to them in the Eat My Hat update. But all of these gray ones, well, not all, but some of these gray ones have been tweaked slightly. The ones that have been changed are the Rogue, the Wanderer, the Arcanist, which is, let's see, the Rogue, the Wanderer, the Arcanist, and then the Ninja. So if we go down, I am once again, as I have said every single video thus far, I am using a very cool guide that keeps track of all of these changes and has officially been updated to the Eat My Hat update. It is in the description. A link to it is in the description if you want to go there. I did not make it. I can take no credit for it, but it is dope and you should absolutely read it. So the first one is the Rogue, and I think that the Rogue is possibly the one that is most likely to move tiers based off of any changes that have been made. So the biggest thing, and in fact the only thing that has been changed for them, I do believe, yes, okay, yes, is that the hood that they used to have, which did nothing, it was just a hood, has been removed and replaced with the Hood of Whispers. So this is very interesting. It is plus 10 to your stealth skill. For reference, they start with 50, so that would put you at 60 stealth, which I believe is the same as the ninja at base, which is pretty solid for sure. And plus 5 ranged backstab damage. Now, that by itself is pretty good, and I'm already going to say that probably moves them up, right? Because that's a really solid hood, all things considered. But it goes further than that, because all of the hats that were introduced in the Eat My Hat update, at least as far as I know, scale their effects with blessings. So if you got a +1 Hood of Whispers, if you blessed it in some way, it would give you, I believe, I don't know how much stealth skill it would give you. I don't know if it would bump it up to 20, but it would definitely give you +5 extra ranged backstab damage if you got a +1 on it, which is pretty solid for sure. That, like, keeping that in mind, I don't think it wildly changes their early game a ton, but I feel like it bumps them up a significant amount regardless, because in the long term, getting that hood beefed up would be pretty solid, would be pretty powerful. I don't think that it's good enough to make them a high reward, like here in C tier. I think that this puts them into B tier, right behind the Hunter, which is kind of their brother in arms, so to speak, because they are both the ranged boys. Again, I don't think it makes them a high reward. I don't think the hood is worth that much long term, especially because backstab damage doesn't really come into play a whole lot against things like bosses and stuff. Neither does stealth for that matter. So it's a mixed bag, but it's definitely solid enough to bump the Rogue up. That hood alone is pretty solid. So next up we have the Wanderer, who also gets a Hood of Whispers, actually. Their normal hood has been removed and replaced with a different Hood of Whispers. This one's a little bit less powerful. Where's the Wanderer? Here. It's 10 stealth skill, just like the other, And again, for reference, we can go down here. The Wanderer starts with 25 stealth baseline, so this would bump it up to 35. And it gives them plus 3 ranged backstab damage, which is a pretty significant drop in damage overall. It's almost 50%. I guess it'd be like 40%, which is fine, I think, overall. The stealth bonus is a lot more powerful on the Wanderer, who has a lower stealth than the Rogue by quite a bit, literally half. So this bumps them up into a much more palatable kind of zone in terms of how much stealth they have. So that's pretty good, and definitely makes the hood worth keeping on to, but I don't think it moves them at all. They're already a high reward class because they have good stat weights with like good constitution and stuff, and solid damage across the board. I don't really think that they need to be moved anywhere based off of this. In addition, the Wanderer was already loaded when it comes to starting equipment once you kind of understand how to use it. This just makes that even more true. All it really does is allow the Wanderer to play to a stronger stealth game, but because I do think you generally want to stick to melee with the Wanderer, like long term, because you have good scaling constitution, it's your second highest stat, and you have good strength, or actually, no, sorry, con is your highest scaling stat alongside strength and perception. So you already are better generally in melee. Yeah, I don't think it changes where they're at pretty much at all, but it is cool. It's nice if you want to go for a ranged Wanderer. Dex is actually their second highest scaling stat, so you can absolutely do that and be quite good. You'll just be slightly worse at the backstab damage than the Rogue is, but the Rogue starts with equipment that can force enemies to kind of look away from you, right, with like the Noisemaker and stuff. So overall, kind of makes sense that the Rogue would have that and the Wanderer wouldn't. I'm almost disappointed that it's ranged combat based. I almost wish that they had gotten their own kind of hood, something a bit more unique, but it is what it is. Like I said before, I think that the Wanderer is already pretty stacked in terms of starting equipment. So next up, we have the Arcanist, who starts with the Apprentice's Hood. Sorry. So this is the Arcanist. They're down here. High risk, high reward. They have, let's see, 30% chance for +1 bonus mana regen per regen tick, which is pretty good. It scales with blessings as well, so it's very solid. This is the hood that the Conjurer starts with, as well as, I think, the Mesmer? I think? Question mark? I'll check that here after we talk about the Arcanist. And the other one. Who was it? The Ninja, that's right. So the Arcanist was already pretty good. They're just kind of bad early game, and I don't think that this really affects them in any meaningful way. They're not even bad early game, they just, because they are so ranged focused, but their crossbow tends to break, and then you just have to wait to get a different ranged weapon, and because they also are okay in terms of magic damage output, but kind of reliant on their staffs. They're just in kind of a tricky place, let's say, when it comes to the very early game. Overall, I don't think the Apprentice Hood changes anything for them. It just makes them a little bit more consistent in terms of getting mana back and being able to survive without a crossbow, which admittedly is quite good for them, but the Sexton, I feel, was already beyond them in a lot of ways. So I don't see myself moving them at all. I think they're fine across the board. They have decent scaling stat weights for what they want to do, which is high DPS, but they're always going to be squishy. So it is what it is when it comes to them. So now we can talk about the Ninja, who is interesting. He actually gets, well, they actually get 2 new things. So first off, they get the Assassin's Hood, which replaces the normal, boring nothingness hood that they used to have. This is +4 melee backstab damage, and of course it scales with blessings. Now, lacking any kind of stealth bonus is meaningless for them because their stealth is already at 60, so it is as high as the rogues is with their hood, right? The fact that they get slightly lower backstab damage isn't a big deal because melee is already better at DPS, right? So this is really only a net gain for them. And since the ninja doesn't really care about wearing something like the artifact hood or whatever, they have a great excuse to wear the assassin's hood the entire game. You get that bad boy blessed a few times, and it's going to get +4 every single time. That's wild, right? Um, the other thing they get is the more interesting part, which is the bandit mask. As you can see, they're wearing a little mask here in this picture. It's now canonical. Isn't that wonderful? So the bandit mask hides your identity, shockingly enough, and allows you to attack shopkeepers without making your true self wanted by the law. That means if you're playing as a human, right, you can put the mask on, you can go into a shop, kill the shopkeeper, take the mask off, and still do business with all other shopkeepers in the game. That's fantastic. However, it does mean that when you go into a shop with the mask on, they haven't heard of COVID down in the Barony dungeons, so they will in fact react with violence and hatred towards you, believing you to be a dirty thief, which you probably are as a ninja. But that's, you know, it's still an assumption. It's still rude. Overall, though, the bandit mask is awesome because it makes human ninjas able to kill shopkeepers, but still get their trading skill up and still like be friendly with humans and whatnot without being a monster race. It's kind of interesting for sure. It's mostly worthless for monster races, but specifically for the one machine race, the automaton, it is useful because automatons are of course neutral to humans and thus shopkeepers. Overall, pretty cool, pretty interesting. Not super useful for monsters, but pretty good for two races at least. And I don't really know how often it will come up, I guess is the issue. For me, if I'm at the point where I'm killing shopkeepers, I'm killing all shopkeepers, right? Like, I'm not sparing any of them to do trading with. But at the same time, I could see myself getting use out of this, because you could trade with them until you're out of money, then kill them, take a bunch of their shit, and find another trader and do the same thing. So it definitely has some use. Overall, obviously they're already at the top of the list. I think once you get the hang of Ninja, they're incredibly safe to play, and their rewards are bonkers good. There's just no downside really to them. So they can't move up any higher, but I don't think it would move them even if it did. So there's that. Overall, that wraps up all the changes that were not in the DLC, which we have already mostly talked about. I don't know if I talked a ton about the Conjurer's Apprentice Hood. It does the exact same thing as the Arcanist one. It gives you a % chance to regen extra mana. This does actually make it more viable for the Skeleton to play as Conjurer, which is kind of cool. And I can confirm, I just double checked here, that the Mesmer is in fact the other class that got an Apprentice Hood, which is pretty cool. Does it move the Mesmer? No, I don't really think so. I think it makes the Mesmer pretty much exactly where they are anyway, but it means I'll probably enjoy playing the Mesmer a little bit more. And it was already one of my favorite classes, so I'm, 10 out of 10, thumbs up, big fan, love it. Overall, I would say that this update, in terms of overall content, has been really good. In terms of how it affects these classes specifically, I almost said races, but these classes specifically, I'm a little bit disappointed, I'm not gonna lie. I love to see that the Rogue got some love, because I feel like the Rogue needed some love, right? I had them in D tier up until this update. I think that the Hood really changes their early game up a little bit and makes it less painful for them to do their jobs. Like, they just needed a little bit of extra damage, honestly, and now they have it. But I'm a little bit disappointed because I feel like the Sexton's Fez, first off, the Fez is the best hat in the game, and it has received 0 buffs, and that's a big sad from me. But I think that the Sexton's hat would have been a cool one to buff, because pretty much every other hat or piece of equipment on this list now has some kind of effect that makes it worth using, right? So we've got the Hood Boys, the stealthy Hood Boys, including the Wanderer. they all got buffs to their hoods, right? You have the Conjurer and the Mesmer and the Arcanist who all got buffs to their unique magic-y hoods. You've got the Wizard whose hat has always given intelligence. You've got the Healer whose shirt gives intelligence. You've got the Joker whose hat gives charisma. Like, all of these give bonuses. I don't remember if the Monk's thing, the Tunic, gives anything. I think the Tunic used to give Constitution, but it doesn't anymore. But like, most of the other classes have like armor on. The Mechanist has the apron that reduces burning. The Punisher's hood is really interesting and cool, adds a lot of cool mechanics, but the Sexton's fez does nothing. And I know I already have the Sexton in the high reward class, where once you get past the early game, they really start to pop off and they become very powerful in their own way. And that is true. I just feel as though there's something to be said for the fact that they just kind of, I don't know. It's just kind of disappointing that the hat update wouldn't buff the best hat in the game. That's all. Overall, with the other changes in the I almost said in the mod, but in the change in the beta patch, they were really good. All of it was pretty solid. The other hats that are not attached to any specific class were all really interesting and fantastic. I'm not going to go into them here. I just wanted to make this update video for the tier list. Very little has changed, and if I were to kind of sit here and go over this again and kind of like eyeball things and see if there's anything else that needs changed, I do have a few small corrections to make that do not have anything to do with the Eat My Hat update. I kind of disagree with my own placement of Mechanist here. I think Mechanist actually deserves to be more like here. In fact, here is where I would put Mechanist. I don't remember why I put them at the bottom of A tier, because life is just a blur sometimes. But I think that overall, the reward is lower on Mechanist, which is probably why they were down there. I think these all have better stat scalings or stat weights, but I think that the Mechanist has a smoother early game, arguably smoother than anyone except the Wizard, but I'd put both of their stat weight bonuses kind of in the same general tier. So if you want to think of these two as being overlapping and pretty much identical, that's probably a good thing to do, frankly. The Wizard has some advantages in like the Gnomish mines, but the Mechanist has advantage in all of the other floors in the early game. Not necessarily enough to, make the Wizard worthless, but like comparatively, they're pretty even. I think that I'd actually put the Hunter over the Merchant, and these two are pretty much interchangeable, I think, at this point. In fact, I might put the Merchant here, honestly. No. I think the Merchant has a really good early game if played well, and can pop off if you get lucky on the occasional run. But I do think that the Hunter is more consistently powerful at high levels of play. I could be wrong on that, but I do kind of feel that way. Overall, those are all the changes I would make to the tier list, though. That's it. It's a pretty short video, at least compared to the hour-and-a-half long videos leading up to this one. But it is what it is, and thank you guys for tuning in for all this and this wild journey that probably I could have just finished in like 30 minutes, but nah. Either way, I'm going to be working on a spell tier list next, and then probably a skill tier list, maybe. I saw that one exists on this site, so I think I might get into that one, but those videos will be much shorter and less gigantic than the race and class tier lists have been. But like I said, thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of stuff. I really enjoy making it and babbling on for hours, so please enable me. And, until then, catch you next time.